A chill wind whistled through the canyons of New Mexico territory as Lily Cooper watched the last wagon of the caravan disappear over the horizon, leaving her alone at the isolated homestead with nothing but a swollen belly and a prayer that her baby would wait just 3 more weeks. Lily brushed a strand of auburn hair from her face and placed a protective hand on her 8-month pregnant stomach. April 1878 had brought unexpected early spring storms to the territory, and the small wooden cabin that had been her home for less than 6 months now seemed desperately inadequate for what lay ahead. Her husband Thomas had left in February to sell their winter furs in Santa Fe, promising to return before the baby came. The letter that arrived 2 weeks ago, carried by a passing merchant, had stolen all her hope. Thomas had been killed in a saloon fight, leaving her alone in this wilderness. The caravan heading east had stopped overnight, offering to take her back to civilization, but their departure time had come before Lily could gather her few possessions. The wagon master, a kind but practical man, had reluctantly left her behind after she'd hesitated too long, torn between abandoning the only home she had and risking childbirth alone in the wilds. "I'll send help when we reach Fort Sumner," he'd promised, but they both knew that might be too late. The first contraction came as she was drawing water from the well. It wasn't strong, just a tightening across her lower back that made her pause and breathe deeply. Too early, she thought. Much too early. Lily had just reached the cabin door when she saw the dust cloud approaching from the west, the opposite direction from the departed caravan. Instinctively, she reached for Thomas's rifle propped beside the door. Bandits, Indians, or worse roamed these parts, and a woman alone was vulnerable prey. The rider appeared through the shimmering heat, waves a single horseman on a dappled gray stallion. Tall and broad-shouldered, he rode with the easy confidence of a man at home in the saddle. Not a bandit, she decided, who would rarely travel alone, but that didn't mean he wasn't dangerous. Lily raised the rifle as the stranger approached, struggling to hold it steady as another contraction gripped her. "That's far enough," she called when he was within earshot. Her voice sounded steadier than she felt. The man halted his horse and raised his hand slowly, showing he meant no harm. "Madam, I don't mean to frighten you. Name's Garrett Evans. I'm just passing through looking for a place to water my horse." "There's a creek half a mile south," Lily said, not lowering the rifle. "You can be on your way." The man Garrett tilted his head, studying her from beneath the brim of a well-worn hat. His face was tanned and weathered from years under the sun, but his eyes were kind, deep blue like the sky after a summer storm. "You all right, madam? You're looking a mite pale." His gaze dropped to her swollen belly, then back to her face with newfound concern. The third contraction hit harder than the first two, and Lily couldn't prevent the small gasp of pain that escaped her lips. The rifle wavered in her hands. Garrett swung down from his horse in one fluid motion. "You're in labor." It wasn't a question. Lily wanted to deny it, to send this stranger away, but another wave of pain bent her double and the rifle clattered to the ground. "My baby's not due for weeks," she managed between clenched teeth. "It's too early." Garrett approached slowly, hands still raised. "Babies have their own schedules, madam. Is your husband nearby?" The simple question brought tears to her eyes. "Dead, 2 months ago." Understanding crossed his face. In 2 strides he was beside her, his arm supporting her waist. "Let's get you inside." "I don't know you," Lily protested weakly, even as she leaned against his solid frame. "No, madam, you don't," Garrett agreed, helping her toward the cabin. "But that little one isn't going to wait for proper introductions. I've helped birth calves and foals aplenty." "Not the same thing, I grant you, but the principle holds." Once inside, he eased her onto the small bed in the corner of the one-room cabin. How far apart are the pains coming? I don't know. They just started. Lily gripped the rough cotton sheets as another contraction seized her. Maybe 20 minutes, Garrett nodded, removing his hat and dusty coat. We've got time then. First babies usually take their time. He rolled up his sleeves, revealing strong, tanned forearms. Do you have clean linens? Water? Lily pointed to the trunk at the foot of the bed. Everything I prepared is in there. But it's too early, she repeated, fear making her voice tremble. The baby needs more time. Garrett knelt beside the trunk and began sorting through the carefully folded baby clothes and linens. Babies come when they come, madam, and this one's coming today. Lily, she said suddenly. My name is Lily Cooper. He looked up and gave her a smile that transformed his rugged face. Pleased to meet you properly, Mrs. Cooper. How did you happen to be passing by? Lily asked, trying to distract herself from the next building contraction. There's nothing out this way for miles. Garrett moved efficiently around the cabin, setting water to boil on the small iron stove, laying out clean linens. I was heading to Fort Sumner, taking a shortcut through these hills. Lucky thing I did. The contraction hit stronger than before. When it passed, she whispered, I'm scared. Garrett paused in his preparations and came to her side. With surprising gentleness, he took her hand in his larger one. Mrs. Cooper, Lily, I want you to listen to me. I know you're afraid and you have every right to be. But I promise you this. I will stay right here through the night, through tomorrow, through however long it takes until that baby is safely in your arms. His blue eyes held such certainty that Lily found herself believing him. Why would you do that for a stranger? A shadow passed across his face. Because 8 years ago, my sister was alone when her time came. No one was there to help her. He didn't need to finish the story. Lily could read the old pain in his eyes. Thank you, she whispered, gripping his hand tighter as another contraction began. The hours passed slowly. The spring sun set in a blaze of orange and purple, and Garrett lit the oil lamps, casting the cabin in a warm glow. He moved with quiet efficiency, checking on Lily, bringing her water, wiping her brow with a cool cloth when the pains intensified. Tell me about yourself, Lily gasped between contractions, which were now coming every few minutes. Distract me. Garrett sat beside her, still holding her hand. Not much to tell. I've been riding the trail since I was 16. Worked as a ranch hand. Drove cattle up from Texas a few times. Did some scouting for the Army during the war with the Comanche. No wife waiting somewhere? Lily asked, then bit her lip as another contraction gripped her. When she could focus again, Garrett was looking at her with a sad smile. There was someone once. She didn't take to the wandering life, married a shopkeeper in Denver last I heard. I'm sorry, Lily said sincerely. Garrett shrugged. It was for the best. Some men aren't meant to put down roots. He gently tucked a damp strand of hair behind her ear. What about you? How did you end up out here all alone? Lily closed her eyes, remembering. Thomas was a dreamer. Said there was good trapping in these hills, enough to set us up proper in a few years. We came out from Missouri last fall. She opened her eyes, meeting Garrett's steady gaze. I loved him for his dreams, even when they didn't make sense. Dreams are what keep us going out here, Garrett said softly. The next contraction was so intense that Lily cried out, clutching Garrett's hand with bruising force. When it passed, she panted. It's time. I can feel it. Garrett didn't hesitate. He helped position her, checked her progress with clinical detachment, and nodded. The baby's coming. When the next pain hits, I need you to push. What followed was a blur of pain and effort unlike anything Lily had ever experienced. Through it all, Garrett remained steady, his voice a calm anchor guiding her through each push, each moment of panic when she thought she couldn't continue. One more, he encouraged as dawn light began to filter through the cabin windows. One more push, Lily. Your baby's almost here." With a final, tremendous effort, Lily bore down, and the miraculous sound of a newborn's cry filled the cabin. "A girl," Garrett announced, his voice filled with wonder as he cradled the tiny, squirming infant. "You have a daughter, Lily." Tears streamed down Lily's face as Garrett gently cleaned the baby, wrapped her in a soft blanket, and placed her in Lily's waiting arms. The infant was small but perfect, with a dusting of dark hair and her father's cleft chin. "Hello, little one," Lily whispered, counting fingers and toes, marveling at the miracle in her arms. "You were in quite a hurry to join us." Garrett moved quietly around the cabin, cleaning up, giving Lily privacy to bond with her daughter. When he finally sat in the chair beside the bed, exhaustion was etched on his face, but his eyes shone with satisfaction. "Thank you," Lily said, the words wholly inadequate for what he had done. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't come along." "You'd have managed," Garrett said with quiet confidence. "You're stronger than you know." Lily shook her head. "I wasn't strong, I was terrified." "Being afraid doesn't mean you aren't brave," Garrett replied. "It just means the thing you're doing matters." The baby made a small sound, and Lily adjusted her swaddling. "I was going to name her Grace if she was a girl, after my mother." "Grace Cooper," Garrett said, smiling at the infant. "It suits her." Lily looked up at the man who had saved them both, this stranger who was no longer a stranger. "Will you stay? Just for a few days, until we're stronger." Something flickered in Garrett's eyes, longing, perhaps, or regret. "I promised I'd stay as long as you needed me. I keep my promises, Lily Cooper." True to his word, Garrett Evans remained at the homestead. Days stretched into a week, then two. He repaired the leaking roof, chopped firewood, hunted fresh game, and helped Lily tend to baby Grace, who thrived despite her early arrival. At night, after Grace was settled, they would sit by the fire and talk. Lily learned that Garrett had fought briefly in the war before it ended, that he'd drifted west afterward, unable to settle back into normal life. He tried his hand at prospecting in Colorado, ranching in Wyoming, and guiding settlers across the plains. "You've lived 3 lifetimes already," Lily remarked one evening as they shared coffee by the hearth. Garrett's laugh was low and rich. "Just been running, if I'm honest, never staying anywhere long enough to belong." "And now?" Lily asked, her heart beating faster as their eyes met. Garrett looked away first. "Fort Sumner will be wondering where I am. I was supposed to deliver a message." "Of course," Lily said quickly, hiding her disappointment. "You've already done more than anyone could ask." The next morning, Garrett was unusually quiet as he went about the chores. Lily watched him from the doorway, Grace cradled against her shoulder, memorizing the way he moved, knowing these might be her last hours in his company. When he finally approached, hat in hand, Lily forced a smile. "You're leaving?" It wasn't a question, but Garrett nodded anyway. "I should get to Fort Sumner. Let them know about your situation. They might send a patrol this way, make sure you're safe." "We'll be fine," Lily said, though the thought of being alone again made her stomach knot with anxiety. "Grace is strong and I'm recovering well." Garrett shifted his weight, uncharacteristically awkward. "I could come back, after I deliver my message, if you wanted." Hope fluttered in Lily's chest, but she tamped it down. "You don't owe us anything more, Garrett. It's not about owing." His blue eyes were serious as they met hers. "It's about wanting to." Before Lily could respond, Grace began to fuss. The moment slipped away as Lily soothed her daughter, and by the time she looked up again, Garrett had stepped back, his expression carefully neutral. "I'll saddle up then. Should reach the fort by nightfall if I push hard." Lily nodded, unable to trust her voice. She watched as he prepared his horse, securing his few belongings, checking the saddle cinch with practiced hands. When there was nothing left to do, he approached her once more. "Goodbye, Lily Cooper," he said softly, then bent to place a gentle kiss on Grace's downy head. "Goodbye, little one." "Safe travels," Lily managed, her throat tight with unshed tears. Garrett swung into the saddle with easy grace. He looked down at them for a long moment, as if committing their image to memory, then turned his horse toward the east and rode away. Lily stood in the doorway long after his figure had disappeared from sight, until Grace's hungry cries finally drew her back inside. The cabin felt emptier than it ever had before. 3 days passed, each one stretching longer than the last. Lily found herself listening constantly for hoofbeats, looking up from her chores at the slightest sound. But the only visitors were the birds that nested in the eaves and the occasional deer that ventured close to the garden plot. On the 4th morning, Lily was hanging freshly washed diapers on the line when she heard the distinct rhythm of an approaching horse. Her heart leapt, but she cautioned herself against hope. It could be anyone, a passing traveler, perhaps, or the patrol Garrett had mentioned. She shaded her eyes against the morning sun, watching as the rider came into view. The dappled gray horse was unmistakable, as was the straight-backed figure in the saddle, Garrett. He rode directly to where she stood, reining in his mount a few feet away. His face was unreadable beneath his hat brim. "You came back," Lily said, unable to keep the wonder from her voice. Garrett dismounted slowly. "I said I would. I wasn't sure." Lily twisted the damp cloth in her hands. "The trail calls to men like you." He took a step closer. "Maybe it did, once." Another step. "But I've found something I want more than open country." Lily's breath caught in her throat. "And what might that be?" Instead of answering, Garrett reached into his saddlebag and withdrew a small package wrapped in brown paper. "For Grace," he said, holding it out. With trembling fingers, Lily unwrapped it to find a beautifully carved wooden rattle, smooth and polished to a honey gold sheen. "I made it at the fort," Garrett explained, "while I was waiting." "Waiting for what?" Lily asked, looking up at him. "For this." From his pocket, he produced an official-looking document. "Land grant. 400 acres, including this homestead and the creek to the south. It's yours, Lily. All legal and proper." Lily stared at the paper in disbelief. "How?" "The commanding officer at Fort Sumner owed me a favor. When I told him about a widow with a newborn trying to make it on her own, he expedited the paperwork." Garrett's expression grew serious. "It's not charity, Lily. You've earned this land with your courage. I just helped with the red tape." Lily ran her fingers over the document, tears blurring her vision. "Thank you," she whispered. "But this doesn't explain why you came back." Garrett took a deep breath, removing his hat. In the sunlight, his hair shone like burnished gold. "I came back because in all my wandering I've never found a place that felt like home. Until now." He gestured to the cabin, the small garden, the distant hills. "It's not just the land, Lily, it's you. You and Grace. These past weeks helping you, being part of something real. It changed me." Hope bloomed in Lily's chest, but caution held her back. "Garrett, you hardly know me." "I know enough," he said simply. "I know you're brave and strong and kind. I know you love fiercely and don't give up, even when you're afraid." His voice softened. "I know that when I rode away, it felt like I was leaving half of myself behind." Lily's hand went to her throat, her pulse racing beneath her fingers. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I'd like to stay. Not as a visitor or a hired hand, but as—" He faltered for the first time. "As someone who could be part of your life, part of Grace's life, if you'll have me." "It's not that simple," Lily protested, even as her heart sang. "There would be talk. A widow living with a man who's not her husband." Garrett's smile was slow and deliberate. "Well, there's a solution to that if you're amenable." Before Lily could respond, a thin wail came from inside the cabin. Grace was awake. "I should." Lily gestured toward the door. "Go." Garrett nodded. "I'll tend to my horse. We can talk more when she's settled." Lily hurried inside, her mind spinning with Garrett's words. Could she really consider what he was suggesting? They barely knew each other. And yet, in those intense days and nights as they'd brought Grace safely into the world, they'd shared something profound, a connection that went beyond ordinary acquaintance. As she lifted Grace from her cradle, soothing her with gentle words, Lily caught sight of herself in the small mirror hanging on the wall. Her cheeks were flushed, her eyes bright with an emotion she hadn't felt since long before Thomas died. Hope, possibility, perhaps even the beginning of love. Grace quieted as Lily fed her, tiny fingers clutching at her mother's shirt front. "What do you think, little one?" Lily whispered. "Could we make a family with him?" The baby blinked up at her with solemn eyes as if considering the question. Outside, Lily could hear Garrett moving around the yard, the familiar sounds of a man at work, the creak of the well pump, the thud of firewood being stacked. Domestic sounds that made the cabin feel like a home again. When Grace was fed and changed, Lily stepped back outside. Garrett had removed his coat and was splitting logs with powerful strokes of the axe, each movement efficient and controlled. He paused when he saw her, setting the axe down and wiping his brow. "She all right?" he asked, nodding toward Grace. "Just hungry," Lily replied. "She's growing so fast." Garrett smiled, his eyes soft as they rested on the baby. "She's a miracle, that one." "Yes," Lily agreed, "our miracle." The words hung in the air between them, weighted with meaning. Garrett's expression grew serious as he stepped closer. "Lily, I meant what I said before. I want to stay. Not just for now, but for good." He gestured to the homestead around them. "This could be something special, the three of us." "It's so sudden," Lily said, but without conviction. "We barely know each other." "Some things you just know," Garrett replied. "I've lived enough to recognize when something's real." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and brushed his fingers against her cheek. "This is real, Lily." The touch of his hand sent warmth spreading through her. "What if you change your mind? What if the trail calls you again?" "It won't," Garrett said with quiet certainty. "Or if it does, we'll follow it together. You, me, and Grace." Lily looked up into his eyes, searching for doubt or hesitation. She found only steady resolve and something deeper, something that made her breath catch. "I'm not asking for promises," Garrett continued. "Just a chance, time to build something together." Grace made a small sound and Lily adjusted her in her arms. "It wouldn't be just me you'd be taking on." Garrett's gaze dropped to the baby, his expression softening. "She's part of why I want to stay, Lily. I was there when she came into this world. I've already started caring for her." He paused. "And for her mother." The simple honesty in his voice broke through Lily's last defenses. "I care for you too," she admitted, the words both frightening and freeing. "More than I should, given how short a time we've known each other." "The heart doesn't measure time the way a clock does," Garrett said. With gentle fingers, he tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "May I?" Lily nodded, knowing what he was asking. Garrett leaned down and pressed his lips to hers in a kiss so tender it brought tears to her eyes. It was brief and chaste, but it carried a promise that made Lily's heart race. When he pulled back, his smile was bright enough to rival the sun. "Is that a yes? You'll let me stay?" "Yes," Lily whispered. "We'll let you stay." The summer of 1878 passed in a golden haze for Lily. Each day brought new discoveries, the deep dimple that appeared in Garrett's left cheek when he truly laughed, the way his hands could be both immensely strong and impossibly gentle, how he sang old trail songs to Grace when he thought Lily wasn't listening. True to his word, Garrett worked tirelessly to improve the homestead. He reinforced the cabin walls against the coming winter, expanded the garden, and built a proper corral for his horse. and the milk cow he traded for at a nearby settlement. Under his care, the land began to flourish, and so did Lily and Grace. "I've been thinking," Garrett said one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the distant mesas. Grace, now 4 months old, was asleep in the cradle Garrett had carved for her. "A dangerous pastime," Lily teased, but her smile was fond. Garrett chuckled, taking her hand in his. His calloused fingers were familiar now, comforting. "I've been thinking about what you said about there being talk." Lily's smile faded. Though they'd had no visitors except for a passing cavalry patrol, she was aware that eventually someone would question their arrangement. "You were right," Garrett continued. "It's not proper the way things are." He shifted to face her directly. "Lily Cooper, I'm asking you properly now. Will you marry me?" Though she had suspected this was coming, the reality of it still took her breath away. "Garrett, I know it hasn't been long," he hurried on, "and I know you're still healing from losing Thomas. But I love you, Lily. I love Grace. I want to be a father to her, a husband to you, a real family." Tears welled in Lily's eyes at the simple declaration. "I love you too," she whispered, the words feeling right and true. "Yes, yes, I'll marry you." The joy that transformed Garrett's face was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. He gathered her into his arms, his kiss deeper and more passionate than any they had shared before. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless. "We'll ride to Fort Sumner next week," Garrett said, his forehead resting against hers. "There's a chaplain there who can perform the ceremony." "So soon?" Lily asked, though her heart thrilled at the thought. "Unless you want to wait." Garrett pulled back slightly, studying her face. Lily shook her head. "No, I don't want to wait. We've already lost too much time." The wedding took place on a bright September morning in the small chapel at Fort Sumner. Lily wore her best dress, freshly laundered and pressed, with wildflowers in her hair that Garrett had gathered at dawn. Grace, dressed in a gown Lily had spent nights sewing by lamplight, watched the proceedings with solemn eyes from the arms of the commander's wife. The ceremony was simple and brief, but as Lily and Garrett exchanged vows before God and the small gathering of soldiers and their families, she felt a sense of rightness settle over her. This was unexpected, unplanned, yet somehow it felt like the path her life had always been meant to take. "I now pronounce you man and wife," the chaplain declared. "You may kiss your bride." Garrett's kiss was tender and reverent, a promise sealed before witnesses. When they turned to face the small congregation as Mr. and Mrs. Evans, Lily's heart was so full she thought it might burst. The commander's wife stepped forward, placing Grace in Lily's arms. "A beautiful family," she said warmly. "You're blessed indeed." "Yes," Lily agreed, looking from Grace to her new husband. "We are." The journey back to the homestead. Their homestead now took 2 days, with frequent stops for Grace's needs. They traveled in a small wagon borrowed from the fort, loaded with wedding gifts from the soldiers and their wives, preserved foods, blankets, tools, and even a rocking chair that the fort carpenter had made especially for Lily. As they crested the final hill and their cabin came into view, Garrett reined in the horses. "Home," he said simply, gazing down at the small structure nestled against the hillside. Lily leaned against his shoulder, Grace sleeping peacefully in her arms. "Home," she echoed. That night, after Grace was settled in her cradle, Lily and Garrett came together as husband and wife for the first time. His touch was gentle, unhurried, as he explored her body with reverent hands. When they finally joined, Lily felt as though she'd found a piece of herself she hadn't known was missing. Afterward, lying in the circle of his arms, Lily traced the outline of his jaw in the moonlight. "I never expected this," she confessed. "When Thomas died, I thought my life was over." I couldn't see a future for me in Grace. Garrett caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. Life has a way of surprising us. If my horse hadn't gone lame last winter, I'd never have taken that job at Fort Sumner. If I hadn't taken that shortcut through these hills. He shook his head, amazed at the chain of coincidences that had brought them together. You believe in fate? Lily asked, settling her head on his chest, comforted by the steady beat of his heart beneath her ear. Garrett was quiet for a moment, thoughtful. I believe that sometimes God puts us exactly where we need to be, even when we don't understand why. I was meant to find you that day, Lily. You and Grace. Lily smiled in the darkness. A guardian angel in dusty boots. His laugh rumbled beneath her cheek. Hardly an angel. Just a man who found his purpose. As autumn painted the surrounding hills in shades of gold and crimson, the Evans family fell into a comfortable rhythm. Garrett rose at dawn to tend to the livestock and work the land, while Lily cared for Grace and kept the cabin. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire, planning for the future, an expanded garden come spring, perhaps a few head of cattle next year, an addition to the cabin as their family grew. Word of their marriage reached the scattered homesteads and small settlements in the territory. Occasionally, travelers would stop by, curious about the couple who had found love in such unlikely circumstances. Lily welcomed them with coffee and fresh bread, while Garrett shared news from the outside world and offered help with wagon repairs or lame horses. "You've created something special here," commented one visitor, a gray-haired woman traveling with her son's family to California. "Not just a homestead, but a haven." Lily had smiled at that, catching Garrett's eye across the room where he was showing the woman's grandsons how to whittle small animals from pine scraps. A haven. Yes, that was exactly what they'd built together. Winter came early that year, bringing howling winds and snow that drifted against the cabin walls. But inside, all was warm and bright. Garrett had stocked enough firewood to last through spring, and the root cellar was full of preserved vegetables and smoked meat. On the coldest nights, they would all sleep in the big bed, Grace nestled between them, safe and secure in the cocoon of their love. "I never thought I could be this happy again," Lily confessed one such night, her voice barely audible above the wind rattling the shutters. Garrett's hand found hers beneath the blankets. "You deserve every happiness, Lily Evans." The name still gave her a little thrill. Lily Evans. A new identity to match her new life. "So do you," she whispered back. "After all your wandering," he squeezed her hand. "I'm exactly where I want to be." As winter gradually released its grip on the land, Grace took her first tottering steps across the cabin floor, falling into Garrett's waiting arms with a delighted giggle. He swung her high, his face alight with fatherly pride. "She's growing so fast," Lily observed, wiping flour-covered hands on her apron. "Soon she'll be running circles around us both." "Good thing we'll have help then," Garrett said with a meaningful look. Lily placed a hand on her still flat stomach. The signs had been there for weeks: the morning sickness, the tender breasts, the sudden aversion to coffee, but she'd only confided her suspicions to Garrett the night before. "Are you happy about it?" she asked, still uncertain. "It's so soon after Grace." Garrett set Grace down on her wobbly legs and crossed to Lily's side, enfolding her in his arms. "I'm beyond happy," he murmured against her hair. "Our family is growing just as this land is. What could be more perfect?" Summer brought their second miracle. After a labor half as long but twice as intense as Grace's birth, Lily delivered a healthy son just as dawn broke over the eastern hills. This time, instead of a stranger helping her through her travail, it was her husband who caught the baby as he entered the world, who placed him in her waiting arms with tears of joy streaming unashamedly down his face. "He's perfect," Garrett whispered, counting tiny fingers and toes. What shall we name him? Lily studied the infant's face, the strong chin, the already determined set of his mouth. How about Samuel, after your father? Garrett's expression softened with surprise and gratitude. Samuel Evans, it's a good, strong name. As Lily watched her husband cradle their newborn son, she was struck by how far they had come in just over a year. From strangers thrown together by circumstance to a family bound by love, their journey had been unexpected but perfect in its own way. Grace, now a sturdy toddler with her father's blue eyes and her mother's determined spirit, peered cautiously at her new brother from the circle of Garrett's arm. "Baby," she said solemnly, reaching out a pudgy finger to touch Samuel's cheek. "That's right, sweetheart," Lily smiled. "Your baby brother. You're going to be a wonderful big sister." The years that followed brought both joys and challenges to the Evans family. The homestead flourished under their care, expanding to include a proper barn, a bunkhouse for the occasional hired hand during busy seasons, and a larger family home to replace the original cabin, which Garrett converted into a workshop. 2 more children joined the family, Catherine in 1881 and Joseph in 1883. With each birth, Garrett was by Lily's side, his steady presence a reminder of that first desperate night when a chance encounter had changed both their lives forever. Grace grew into a confident young girl with her mother's auburn hair and a natural affinity for horses that delighted Garrett. She would often accompany him on his rounds of the property, asking endless questions about the land, the animals, and his life before he met her mother. "Were you really a wanderer, Papa?" she asked one afternoon as they mended a section of fence together. At 10 years old, Grace was already skilled with tools, preferring outdoor work to domestic chores. Garrett smiled at the term she'd chosen. "I suppose I was. I never stayed anywhere long enough to put down roots." "Why not?" Grace handed him another fence slat. He considered the question carefully. "I was restless, always looking for something without knowing what it was." "And then you found Mama and me," Grace said with the certainty of a child who has heard the story many times. "And then I found you," Garrett agreed, ruffling her hair affectionately. "And I finally understood what I'd been searching for all along." "Home," Grace said with satisfaction. "Not just a place," Garrett corrected gently, "but people to love who love you back. That's what makes a home, Gracie girl." On a warm evening in the summer of 1888, Lily and Garrett sat on the porch of their home, watching their children play in the yard. Samuel, now 9, was teaching 5-year-old Joseph how to throw a lasso, while Catherine, 7, supervised with all the authority of an older sister. Grace, nearly 11, was absorbed in a book, her back against the old oak tree Garrett had planted the year they were married. 10 years, Lily mused, leaning against her husband's shoulder. "Can you believe it's been 10 years since you rode up to my cabin?" Garrett slipped his arm around her waist, drawing her closer. "Best detour I ever took. Do you ever regret it?" Lily asked, settling down, giving up the trail. Garrett turned to look at her, his blue eyes as intense as they had been on that first day. "Not for a single moment," he said firmly. "Everything I want is right here." Lily rested her head on his shoulder, contentment washing over her. "Do you remember what you said that night? When I was afraid the baby would come and I'd be all alone. I promised I'd stay through the night," Garrett recalled. "Through however long it took." "You've kept that promise," Lily said softly, "and so many more besides." Garrett pressed a kiss to her temple. "Easiest promises I ever made." As twilight deepened into night, they called the children in for supper. Gathered around the large table Garrett had crafted from pine harvested on their own land, the Evans family bowed their heads for grace. "For this food and for each other we give thanks," Garrett said, his deep voice filling the room. As he spoke the familiar words, his eyes met Lily's across the table, and in that glance was a world of shared memories, the fear and pain of Grace's birth, the joy of their wedding day, the challenges they'd faced and overcome together. Later, after the children were tucked into bed, Lily and Garrett stood on the porch once more, gazing up at the star-filled sky. The same stars that had witnessed their first meeting now shone down on the life they had built together. "I used to be so afraid," Lily confessed, entwined in her husband's embrace. "Afraid of being alone, of failing, of not being strong enough." "And now?" Garrett asked, his breath warm against her hair. Lily smiled, turning in his arms to face him. "Now I know that being brave isn't about not being afraid. It's about finding someone to be afraid with." She reached up to trace the beloved lines of his face, still handsome after all these years. Someone to share the dark nights and the bright mornings. "Someone to promise they'll stay," Garrett added, catching her hand and pressing a kiss to her palm. "And mean it," Lily whispered. Their lips met in a kiss as tender as their first, yet deepened by years of shared joys and sorrows, of children born and raised, of a love that had begun in the most unlikely circumstances, but had grown strong and true with the passing seasons. From that desperate night when a lone cowboy had promised a frightened woman that she wouldn't have to face childbirth alone, through all the years that followed, Garrett and Lily Evans had created something rare and precious, not just a homestead or a family, but a haven of love in the wild country. A place where promises were made and kept, where strangers became beloved, and where the journey of a lifetime began with a simple act of kindness on a spring day in 1878. The story of the Evans family would be told and retold in the territory for generations to come, how Lily Cooper, alone and afraid, had found not just help but enduring love when she needed it most, and how Garrett Evans, the restless wanderer, had finally found his home in the arms of a brave woman, and the children they raised together beneath the vast western sky. But on that starlit night, as they stood wrapped in each other's arms on the porch of the home they had built, Lily and Garrett weren't thinking of legends or legacies. They were simply grateful for the twist of fate that had brought them together, for the courage that had allowed them to take a chance on love, and for the promise of all the tomorrows still to come. "I love you, Lily Evans," Garrett murmured against her lips. "Through the night and all the days to come." "And I love you," Lily replied, her heart as full as it had been on the day she first welcomed him into her life. "My cowboy, my love, my home."